Good morning, everyone. I hope you guys had a good breakfast and are bright and bushy-tailed and ready to rock and roll. My name is Rick Martin. I'm going to be talking this morning a little bit about using source control and Clarion in combination. A lot of you guys have heard parts or all of this before at one point or another, but if you have questions, don't hesitate to throw up your hand and we'll get the cube to you one way or another. So just a brief recap of kind of what source control is. Fundamentally, it's a way to track all the changes that you make to your source code. I mean, in a nutshell, that's really all it is. Although there's a lot more to it than that. The whole idea is that when you make changes, sometimes it's really important to know, well, what changed, when it changed, hopefully why it changed. So basically, it allows you to look at those changes, compare to current revisions, past revisions. It allows you to retrieve those past revisions. It's often used with building your system. So most source controls work with either some kind of command line tool or even automated build systems. So it really just is kind of a way, honestly, like to manage your code. So why? So one of the biggest reasons, well, there's two big reasons. In the past number of presentations, I've really talked about the last one, multiple developers on the same app. With Clarion, it's not impossible, obviously, but it's difficult to have two developers working on the same apps, the same system at the same time. Traditionally, what happens is, well, Joe, I'm going to work on the customer app today, and Fred, I'm going to work on whatever, another data DLL. And you try to coordinate it like that. But in the end, you often have to have a merge process going on, which usually means that everyone takes their changes, sends them to somebody, and that person integrates those changes together and then creates a build and creates the new apps and pushes those apps back out to the other developers. That's a very manual process, and in my experience with helping people set up source control, it's usually the head developer or the lead developer who actually does that job. And that's actually exactly the wrong person to be spending time doing what's fundamentally a manual task. There's a couple people in here, I'm sure, who will attest to that very thing. So taking that responsibility away from that person lets them focus on what they're good at and then allows everyone to basically handle their own merges and their own pushing of changes and that kind of thing. But I'm not going to talk about that because a lot of you aren't multi-developer shops. You're single shops, single developer. So why do you want to do it? My favorite one is kind of the middle one. When you have your source and source control, you can make any change you want. You can make a change, commit it, go down. Suddenly 3 weeks later, you realize that this was a horrible idea. Now what do? So do you go to your zips? Try to find out exactly when you made those changes, where you made those changes, and try to get back. But maybe I made a couple other little changes I want to keep. Well, you can go back, look at your history, and go back to any point in time exactly. And when I say any point in time, I really mean it. So let's take a brief look here. This is a Git repository. So I'm actually going to use Gordon from AccuFunds. This is his Clarion repository. All right, come on. Please. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the log. So this is a log of every change ever made to this Clarion folder and development system going back from like a couple days ago, because I haven't pulled recently, going all the way back to 2013. Oh, I know it's 2012. There we go. Every single change ever made. We can go back in time. You can actually simply, if we wanted for some reason to go back to July, we could right-click on here, check that out, and our Clarion environment would be exactly what it was on that day, no question. So that really allows you to make changes without fear. You don't have to worry about what did I do and how can I go back to what I had before. The other really nice thing is you can see some of these, what are called tags. So these are basically versions of the AccuFund product that we tagged when we did builds. So you can go back to any one of these tags and also right-click on it, and you know that you have the Clarion that was exactly the Clarion that was used to make the 6305 version. So it really gives you power over knowing what your software is and where it is and how to get back to that code. And I think, honestly, that frees you up. So that kind of brings me to me. So because it is difficult to use source control with a binary app format, you can check in an app file into any source control system, but that really limits you because it is binary. So all the normal source control functions, like comparing changes, you can't compare the changes in an app file. Merging changes between two people, you can't do that with an app file. So binary files really don't work. So my solution has been to export the app to the TXA format, which is text. Source control loves text. And then even beyond that, to break the app up into individual modules. So what you're committing into source control is each of the modules that are in your app in a source format, which makes it very easy then to compare and see changes that you made. It takes a little getting used to the app format, but once you do kind of get used to the TXA, it's very powerful to see what changes. So let's kind of take a peek. So our famous DLL Tutor app. So with my system, once you open an app, you get a little upper part version control menu system, which basically allows you to save your apps out to source control or import changes back in. So you would import changes back in either when you're trying to get changes from another developer or if you did want to go back to a previous version, and then you would re-import all the apps to get those changes. Besides the app menu, we also have integrated into the solution. So in the solution, you have a number of new options that show up with the add-in. So basically, you can import all, save all. You can also save or import individual apps from here as well. So what happens, let's go back over here to our Git. So as far as different source control systems, pretty much I would say Git seems to be winning the source control battle. I think Mercurial, which is another distributed source control system, I think they've actually stopped development on it or talking about stopping development on it. So in the past, we had like SVN, CVS. I know there's definitely still a number of SVN users out there, but Tortoise? Well, Tortoise is a shell. So Roberto just brought up Tortoise. So Tortoise is a shell interface to almost all the source control systems. And what it does, it integrates into Windows Explorer. So then you have a bunch of options out here that you can right-click and do source control operations from Windows Explorer. So Tortoise actually supports CVS and Git, SVN. There's a version of it for virtually all of those. The Windows Explorer interface is okay, but I really like a more dedicated tool. So this tool I'm using here is called SmartGit. Now, it is a paid product. But I found it's not really that expensive. I don't remember exactly the price. I think in the $70 range, somewhere in there. There's another free product called SourceTree. I know a number of people use that with Git, and I think it's fully featured. I think a lot of people do use it, but I've just kind of gotten used to SmartGit. So there are a number of interfaces, and that's one of the things is you will need some kind of client to actually do the work with the source control. So my product basically is the integration into Clarion, but then you'll also definitely work with some other tool on the outside. So if we go down here to our Git test, so this little arrow here, that actually indicates that I've made changes locally that have not been pushed up to the cloud yet. So this is a Bitbucket account. So if my nice little small screen resolution, thank you, John. not going to let me get any smaller. So normally you can see down here at the bottom, you can kind of see, here are changes that I've made. So here's my upgrade to Clarion 11. So I've not pushed these changes up to Bitbucket in the cloud yet. So let's go ahead and make a change. So we have our all files. We come down here. Actually, let's go to all right, well, we don't want this message. We want to go welcome. CIDC 2019. All right, so there's our big change. See, we're no longer in 13. So we save that, we compile it, we test it, hopefully, and we're really, really happy with our change. So we can now go and say, well, we want to save those changes to source control. And it gives me an error. You gotta love that. There's been some fun things with Clarion 10 and 11. Seems like with each new major release of Clarion, they tweak things just enough that I need to go in and make changes to the source control add-in to make it actually work. So if we come out here, we can see that changes have occurred. So this was part of the export process. My tool basically exported the big TXA. It then processed that TXA, broke it up into the modules, and moved those modules into the source control folders. So we look here, we can see our changes, and right here we can see exactly what change that we made. So then when we're ready to what we call commit that, so when we commit it, we basically say, well, we're going to make these changes permanent. So we're going to say, we updated our message to 2019. So if you don't use some kind of bug tracking system, I strongly recommend that you do, even if you're a single user shop. There's a number of ones out there that are free, especially free for small shops. I use FogBugs. It's an online product. It's free for teams of 5 or less. Mantis is another, I believe, free product, isn't it? Yeah, there's a number of tools out there. Using a bug tracking system really helps you focus on what you need to do, prioritize those, give a really good description, hopefully, of what the problem is and what you need to do to fix it. And then in conjunction with that, when you're committing changes in source control, it's really a good idea to give a relatively detailed description of what fix or change you're making. You don't need to write a book, but you need to do something other than fixed a bug or fixed something or new procedure. Totally avoid those kind of things. In fact, there was a system I built years ago for Simonton Windows, not out in the back, where we actually had a hook on the back end, and if someone put in either really simple or empty comments, we rejected the commit. We made them at least put something, well, hopefully meaningful in. The other thing I really like to do is, if you do use a bug system, is make sure you reference the bug number in your commit. Because then when you're going back and looking at your history, and you're going, well, why in heck did Marty make this change? And you can go, okay, well, look, it's bug number 45. Let's go to the bug system, and now you have a big description of what was going on at that time and why someone was making that change. And then you go along and say, Marty, you're really in trouble, because it doesn't work. Anyway, so again, I recommend you give a meaningful but not necessarily extensive commit message. Again, if you have a bug tracking system, add it. You'll be so much happier when you have to go back in time. Yes? Do you have that hook in this? So the question is do I have that hook in this? That's actually part of the source control system itself. So there, when I'm doing that commit, I'm actually committing into Git in this case. So there are hooks that you can write in Git or any of the source control systems to do that kind of thing. It's not really part of my product because that's really the taking back and forth in and out of Clarion. But almost all the source control systems have some kind of hooking ability for sure.
We have an online question.
Sure.
From Dinko, who says, after initial commit, if someone adds a new procedure and repopulates the modules of different names than the procedures, it's obviously the programmer's fault, but what do you do to rename it correctly?
Don't do that. Fundamentally, Bruce was talking about doing the repopulate and renumber yesterday, the day before. Don't do that. That will basically break fundamentally everything. So, but the nice thing, if that does happen, do we want to do an experiment? Never done it before. Let's give it a whirl. We're live, baby. I have no idea what's going to happen, so let's find out. But again, what I was talking about earlier with no fear, no matter what we do right here, I can rebuild everything exactly the way it is right now in source control. Period. I could reformat my hard drive, go back out, pull everything down from the cloud, rebuild it, and it's going to be exactly what it was. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with no fear. Well, we want to do my experiment first, or a quick question?
Real quick,
right.
What was the name? Was that bug you said?
Fog bugs.
Fog, like F-O-G?
Yep, like a foggy day.
Oh, okay, I got it. I had it. I understood bog, not fog. Okay.
All right, let's see what happens when we redistribute procedures here. All right, boys and girls, let's go.
Okay, here we go.
We'll even go 3 per module. Actually, like I said, I have no idea what's going to happen here. All right, so it kept my module names, you can see, but it redistributed the procedures within them. So that's interesting. Let's see what happens if we do a renumber modules. Oh, okay, so it maintained my names even though we did that. So we did make some changes here. So let's go ahead and save that. All right, so if we go back out to our source control now, we can see, all right, well, we got rid of main. Actually, main's missing. And we've got another one that it's been removed, and then we got our other. So, okay, what happens if we go, well, we don't like that? All of a sudden, I'm really scared. So one of the things we can do is come in here, and we go like this. We can discard all of our changes. And except for that guy. Got a new one? There we go. So now let's go back down in here. We're going to do an import. Now, no, we don't need to save changes to this app. We're going to override our app. You guys are putting me to the test here. All right, so now we go to our module view, and we're back. So again, that's kind of what I was talking about, the power of being able to make changes, do whatever you want. If you all of a sudden realize that it isn't what you wanted, you can go back to any point in time. So one of the other things you can do, so like I said, so we have our changes here. I can push those up to the cloud, except for I'm not going to do that because I haven't put in my password and information on this one. That's interesting. That should have worked, but anyway, so you can push your changes up to the cloud. You can pull changes down from other developers. I won't do a merge example today, but when you do pull changes, if 2 developers have both make changes in the same module, Git is actually really good, and most source control systems are, about merging those modules, those changes together without you having to do anything. Because most of the time you're not both making changes to the same line of source code. Obviously, if you do, you're going to get a conflict. Now, unfortunately, the TXA format with Clarion is entertaining, I'll say. There's lots of noise, is the best way to describe it. And that noise changes, unfortunately. You can export an app, compile it again, and export it again, and things will change even though you didn't do anything. And that's an unfortunate reality. My understanding from the soft velocity side of things is that's probably never going to change. I've done some work to try to analyze things that I know are not important so that I can say, okay, well, these changes are insignificant, so I won't copy them over. But you're going to get some noise, and it's frustrating, I'll admit, but you get used to it after a while. It's far better to have the reality of source control than to, and to deal with those little things. Roberto?
When you do an import,
I'll repeat it.
oh. Roberto, it's right here.
Oh, cool.
When you do an import, it does an import TXA, right? So
Yeah, so
what do you do when you have those procedures like RPM where the parameter or the prototype disappears or changes name, or NetTalk that have the filter section and the quotes? When you have a filter, they convert.
So there was some issues. I'm not sure about the quote thing. I'll be honest. I mean, I have a lot of NetTalk stuff in the programs I work on. I don't think I've seen that. So
It happens to me all the time when the quotes disappear when you
well, show me
just copy
sometime.
a procedure.
Okay, well, show me sometime later. There was a big issue with the prototype parameters. Probably don't need to get into too much detail, but in the migration, somewhere in the 10 version, they moved the parameters from inside the little action button to out on the main screen, which everyone loved. Well, that kind of had some troubles in the source control side of things because the TXA changed dramatically and it just didn't get handled properly. So I have things in there that should be handling that, Roberto. So if you're having problems, talk to me and we can take a look. Because once it's converted over, it should be fine. Are we on time? We're almost there. Any more questions? Yeah. Box. Get the squeeze box. Roberto. He got his question answered, and he's like, I'm done.
Yeah, he's happy now. I just wondered, have you got any plans to do anything with monitoring the dictionaries?
So dictionaries are an entertaining beast. So there is the new DCTX format, which is XML, which I love. I wish they would actually do that with the TXA. So there's a couple issues there. One is that the dictionary is completely a private class object in the IDE. So I can't really get a handle on it the same way I can with the app. And maybe I'll talk to Bob and see if we can get some changes on that. So I really can't do the things that I can do with the app with the dictionary. Now, saying that, we do have our export dictionary option from the command line now. I probably won't have time to show that, but I was going to show a little something on the command line. So we could do it. Problem is that there's some bugs in the export of the dictionary. So options can disappear. Options can get moved from one table to another. So I'm reluctant to tell people to do that as a form of source control.
What I've found I'm doing is I'm manually exporting, like you say, to the text version.
Right.
Just for looking at comparisons.
Sure.
I must admit, I keep a copy of the binary file in there for going up into Bitbucket or whatever.
And actually, that's not a bad idea with a binary file. So I do the same thing with Setup Builder. So Setup Builder is a binary file, your project, but they do have an export to text. And now you don't get every setting, but it does allow you to commit the binary and commit a text file along with it. I do the same thing with Crystal Reports. I export the Crystal Reports to XML, and I commit those together. So that way you do have something you can do a comparison on to look for changes.
That's it. It's just if you've added or removed
Right.
fields or something.
But
like
as far
that,
as
it's
relying on it, I wouldn't, unfortunately. If you don't have those options in that way that cause those bugs, you can be fine. But it just scares the bejesus out of me to go, well, I might export my dictionary, and when I import it back in, it's not going to be the same. So I think we're pretty close on time. So any last questions? All right, well, I'm certainly available. Oh, other way, Rick. So my product is the Upper Park version control add-in. It's available on Clarion Shop, or you can contact me directly. It's my email information. I'm here all week, so if you got any questions, come and give me a shout. Thank you very much. And I'm your next presenter as well.